this conference was really famous because we got a lot of politicians speaking at this conference. So not only was Trump and RFK, who are the two main stars, there were other politicians like Vivek Ramaswamy, who's a rising star in the Republican side, and then there was senators, right? So I believe Senator Cynthia Loomis, who is from Wyoming, and Senator Tim Scott, who's from South Carolina. They both spoke at the conference as well. So they're both like super pro Bitcoin and stuff. So I just want to, kind of illustrate that this is the first time that we have politicians kind of speaking, whereas like before it was just, the OGs of Bitcoin and the nerds and the, finance people. But now we have the government kind of taking a positive interest in Bitcoin as well, which is nice. And, I don't want to make this political, but they invited Kamala Harris and she refused to come. So right now, it's pretty clear that it's mostly Republicans who are in support of Bitcoin. So maybe we can discuss that. Why are the Democrats against it, and why are Republicans for it? So maybe that will be a topic that we'll discuss later. But let me just go through some of the content of what each kind of person announced, right? So RFK basically went like all in, right? So I feel like RFK is somebody who truly understands Bitcoin. And he says he got into Bitcoin because of the Canadian trucker convoy protest, by the way, where Trudeau just used the Emergencies Act to freeze everyone's bank account, which I know, Tristan, for you, that was like kind of a triggering point for you to pivot into Bitcoin as well, right? So, maybe like we should thank Trudeau for being such a great marketer for Bitcoin, because he converted you and he converted RFK, right? But RFK basically he went all in, and he's like, if I'm elected president, I will buy up to 4 million Bitcoin. So there's only 21 million Bitcoin that's ever going to be. And right now there's not even 21 million. Right now there's like 19 point something million that have been mined. And out of that, there's like 5 million that's lost. And another million that's in the hands of Satoshi, which has never been moved. So there's only like 13, 14 million that's available at any given time. And RFK wants to buy 4 million Bitcoin if he's elected, right? So yeah, basically that was like kind of the biggest announcement. And basically he's like, promoting all this pro Bitcoin legislation, and he'll definitely like be a great kind of the Bitcoin president if he's elected, right? But unfortunately, a lot of people are saying, he's at like less than 10% in support, maybe just right around there. So he's unlikely to be the next president, unfortunately. So everybody started looking at Trump, right? And I said I lined up 3 hours to see Trump, and it was slightly disappointing, to be honest, because it seems like Trump doesn't understand Bitcoin quite the same way that RFK does, which, Trump is old, right? So it's like maybe give him some slack for that, but at least he's willing to get out of the way. That's kind of the like, you know, uh, consensus or the conclusion that I got from this speech is that Trump wants to hodl the current Bitcoin like reserves that the U.S. has, which were seized from illegal activities. And that bag is just over 200,000 Bitcoin. So, not quite 4 million like RFK was promising, but it's still a decent chunk. And if the US kind of sets that aside and never sells it and uses it as a reserve, I think that could be really great as well. And then one thing that was really kind of funny was Trump was saying how he is promising to fire Gary Gensler on day one, which Gary Gensler, I'm sure everybody knows who he is in the Bitcoin space, but in case you don't, Gary Gensler is the current chairman of the SEC. And the SEC has, under Gensler, has been known to like go after all these crypto companies and Bitcoin companies, no matter if they're legit or not. They're like kind of trying to regulate them out of existence. And, Gary Gensler is friends with Elizabeth Warren, who is the leader of the so-called anti-crypto army. So, they're basically they're like close friends who are pushing each other's like agenda and, pushing the agenda of like cracking down on Bitcoin and on crypto. So Trump was like, on day one, I'm going to fire Gary Gensler. Everyone started like super like cheering super loudly. And I think Trump was like actually taken aback by how big of a like how popular that was a thing to say, right? Like nobody warned him that this would be like such a well received, like it exceeded his expectations, right? And then he even said he was like, wow, I didn't think he was this unpopular. And then he's like, you know what? I'm going to say it again. I'm going to fire Gary Gensler, right? So and then everybody cheered even louder. So yeah, no love for Gensler at Bitcoin Nashville for sure. So that was kind of like what was announced, and then maybe I'll tie this story right into it. So right after that, uh, right after the conference, or right after the Trump speech, Bitcoin kind of took a dip, and people are wondering why. And then somebody saw that the US government has moved $2 billion worth of Bitcoin, which is right around 30,000 Bitcoin, to a new wallet. So we weren't sure like what exactly they're doing. So there's speculations that they're trying to dump like 30,000 Bitcoin just to spite Trump, right? Because right now the government is in control by the Dems, and the Dems are, against, like, if Trump is for something, the Dems are probably going to be against it, right? So Trump just announced that, oh, I'm going to hodl all this Bitcoin. And then maybe, this is speculation, I don't know this for sure, but maybe the Dems are like, you can't hodl anything if we just dump it all before the election, right? Just even if you win, then like you won't be able to hodl anything. So maybe there's some kind of political maneuvering going on in the background, but it does appear that the U.S. government has moved 30,000 Bitcoin just on a very weird timing. The timing is very weird, right? It's like right after Trump's Bitcoin Nashville speech. So yeah, basically, now I'm gonna toss the questions to you, and the questions are: first of all, this $2 billion worth of Bitcoin thing. What do you think? Do you think that they did this to spite Trump? Do you think there's some like ulterior motive at play to like kind of get back at Trump for supporting Bitcoin? And what did you think about? I'm not sure if you watched any of the speeches, the RFK speeches and the Trump speech, but if you did, or even if you didn't, just hearing my synopsis of it, what did you think? And who do you think is going to be better for crypto? And who do you think, or Bitcoin, I should say? And who do you think is gonna like? Do you think that this will actually make a difference in the election as a whole?
So I watched part of Trump's speech on it, and I'll say that I wasn't super duper impressed with what he was saying. He was just kind of talking a lot and not saying a whole ton. It seemed, at least in my opinion. That being said, the general perception of I won't get in the way. He's at least there and listening, which he may just be pandering to the Bitcoin crowd, but I'll take pandering over doing actively against, you know. So I would say that he was showing up and proving that he was interested and outputting, showing an expectation that, giving us the expectation that he was at least going to not be a problem child for Bitcoin itself. Let it run its course, um, with without government interference, which personally I think is generally a good thing for us and for Bitcoin itself. So that being said, I think that the speech wasn't nearly as bullish or Bitcoin focused as it could have been, and I think that the RFK speech was much more um, convincing on that front, where he talked a lot about those kind of the benefits and the trucker rally where they froze bank accounts and that kind of stuff. A lot of those were big catalysts for people getting into Bitcoin, because you had a clear vision of what the government could do if they chose to do so, because of the fact that they have proven willing to do it in the past. So from that perspective, I think having the ability to insulate yourself from that situation is valuable, particularly given you might not have agreed with the trucker rally or anything, but the fact that they could do it for the trucker rally means that for something that you care about in the future, they could do it for that, right? So whether or not you were on side or against or whatever, the simple fact of the matter is the government has proven willing to act against individuals who are standing up for like protesting in the parliament. And again, whether or not they're being disruptive, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's really just the precedent, I would say, that's kind of that's very problematic. So yeah, so I think RFK kind of gets it, and I think that's kind of the more interesting thing is that there's a politician who does kind of get it, because I feel like in the past, most of the time when I look at politicians, they're just kind of like they're asking if Google knows if I'm talking, if I get up and walk over to the bench on the other side, those kind of videos where they have no idea how the heck the technology works. They're just spitballing. And I feel like this is a case where he is RFK at least seems like he's he understands the benefits and the scenario, and as Andy loves to say, the gravity of the situation. So I thought that was a good sign. So did I miss anything? I think
No, that about covers it. Dom, why don't you impart your opinion? What do you think?
So like, to be fair, I don't think I have seen like the Trump or the other interview quite yet, but I probably will check it out as soon as I have the chance. And then in regards to like the 2 billion being transferred, yeah, maybe it's like extremely convenient, so it could possibly be like a reason behind it, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't feel like I can answer like that well enough because don't know if it's to like create any like stir in the pots, but uh, I'm like
Yeah,
speechless right
no,
now. God.
no worries. Like maybe I can just explain a bit, because if you have questions, maybe our audience members have questions too, right? About this, like, strategic reserve kind of stuff. Like, exactly does it mean, right? So, just think of it as a gold reserve, right? So a lot of countries have a gold reserve. And in fact, China's been building their gold reserve and buying gold like crazy for a long time. And the idea is that if there is some crisis, if there is some war that you need to like fund to defend your country, then fiat money is going to get printed, right? So once that fiat money gets printed, then people are going to stop trusting your fiat money, because what if you lose the war and your country doesn't exist anymore? Then your fiat's worthless, and even if you win, then it's going to get inflated, right? So what countries would do is set aside, let's say, a certain amount of gold, where gold is valuable regardless of if you win or lose the war, and regardless of how well you deal with any type of crisis. So the idea with a Bitcoin reserve uh, is kind of like the gold idea, except Bitcoin is easier to store, and it's harder money than gold, right? Because it's more rare than gold. Gold you can dig for more, and what if you discover a deposit of gold somewhere that you didn't know existed, right? So and gold is heavy, so it's hard to transport and stuff like that. So there's a lot of benefit that Bitcoin has over gold, and has a lot of similarities on to gold, where gold excels. So I think it just makes sense from a national security standpoint, for especially a country like the United States, who's trying to become, or who is the world superpower, and try to retain their position as the world's premier superpower. I think it just makes sense to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, because right now Bitcoin is still relatively low in terms of price in the grand scheme of things, right? There's nothing stopping the U.S. government from printing some fiat money and buying Bitcoin with it, and then in the future, it will look it will look really smart, right? So if you, I don't know if you like guys know this piece of history, but the United States has bought land before with fiat money, or I guess back then it was gold backed, but still, right? They used their capital reserves to buy land, and then all of the land purchases were great ideas, right? And it's like led to the United States becoming the world's premier superpower. And I'm talking about the Louisiana land purchase and the purchase of Alaska, right? So those two together increase the size of the United States just by geographic area, by magnitudes, and those were heavy contributors to America's success in history and on the world stage. So something like this, I think, it requires people, it requires politicians to have long-term vision, which is really rare these days. You don't meet a lot of politicians with long-term vision, unfortunately. And I'm talking about both Canada and the US, by the way, right? But I think something like a strategic Bitcoin reserve is something that if a politician had long-term vision, that they should do. So this is just kind of like a brief explainer. And back to, I think Tristan, you brought up this point earlier where we have this kind of dichotomy between these three candidates that are running for president, right? Donald Trump, RFK, and Kamala Harris, where RFK understands Bitcoin. I wouldn't say completely, but he understands a lot more than like a lot of people, including like Trump or Kamala. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like RFK will win. And I found out he's not even on the ballot in Tennessee. So he's not on the ballot in all 50 states. So it's kind of hard to win the presidency if you're not on the ballot, right? And it's not his fault, by the way. I don't want to sound like I'm blaming him. It's because of all these like archaic rules that favor the two governing parties. It's a mess, right? It's hard to run as an independent, I'm sure. But unfortunately, the fact is RFK is not on the ballot in a lot of states, so he's probably not going to win. So our like final choice is between Kamala Harris, who working with the Biden administration has propped up Gary Gensler, who's propped up all these policies that are openly hostile towards Bitcoin and the crypto industry. And then you have someone like Trump, who he doesn't understand like Bitcoin fully, but he's willing to listen to experts and listen to advice, right? And I know it sounds ridiculous for those viewers or those people who might be anti-Trump for me to say or for you to hear that Trump is willing to listen, but it's true, right? Like Trump used to be anti-Bitcoin, but then he pivoted super fast when it appears that a lot of these like tech elites or Silicon Valley people or Wall Street people are now pro Bitcoin. Trump is like, you know what, like this is actually a great thing, right? You can call it pandering if you want, and maybe it is pandering, but again, at least he's willing to listen and he's willing to change his mind. And some viewers might have been rubbed the wrong way last episode when I said that I was endorsing Trump, but I still stand by what I said. I just think that out of the candidates that are running, I actually align with RFK more than I do with Trump. But I think if I was, I'm Canadian, by the way, so I can't vote. So like my endorsement doesn't actually matter. But if I could vote, then I would still vote for Trump. And in fact, I got this hat, this MAGA hat that they were handing out at the conference. So I will proudly put that on my shelf or even wear it during election night. So I know you guys are in Calgary, but I am throwing an election night party. If by any chance you guys wanted to come back to Ontario land in November, it's elections November 5th. If you guys want to come to Ontario land, you guys are invited to the party. If not, we can remotely celebrate election night, where I will be wearing my MAGA hat.